All right. Welcome to another episode of Conversational Pace. We have the Hoka Challenger 7 today. This is the 7th generation of Hoka's classic door-to-trail, kind of Hoka Clifton sibling type shoe. Minor changes from the 6th version to the 7th. We'll get into all the details soon. Got my co-host as usual, Finn Melanson. Finn, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, and I'll just add one thing. I have been on many runs here in the greater Salt Lake area where it is door to trail, and I have friends, myself included, who will bring an extra pair of shoes that are more appropriate for said trail that they're going on, and they'll stash the road for whatever they're using en route at the trailhead. So,
wow,
killing two birds with one stone here.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely their plan the whole time. These shoes were provided to us by Hoka, but we're under no financial obligation to say whether we like or dislike a product because we want to keep these reviews authentic and beneficial for you. So no one will get to preview or watch this footage before it gets published to YouTube. With that, let's get on with some quick stats on the shoe. So got a little price bump. We're looking $145 for this Challenger 7 now. Also, Hoka quietly removed the ATR from the branding. So all of the previous Hoka models were like Hoka Challenger ATR 1, 2, 3. Now it's just Hoka Challenger 7, which I don't really know why they decided to go for that. I appreciate them trying to make the name shorter because the last few reviews, the trail shoe names were way too long. So I appreciate the simplicity there. Just let it be its own thing. $145. My pair came in at 9.4 ounces in a US men's size 10, which is actually a little bit lighter than the previous model. 26 millimeter stack in the forefoot, 31 millimeters in the heel, which is actually a 2 millimeter increase in stack height over the Challenger 6. Makes for a 5 millimeter drop. The upper is just one piece it's just an engineered mesh upper, just one piece, no extra funny business going on up here. It's very simple. There's a little bit of welded overlay just right around the laces. There's a very generous amount of padding in the tongue and the ankle collar, and they went for the swoopy heel, makes getting the shoe on a little bit easier. Also can reduce some of that pressure that sometimes people feel along the Achilles. The tongue is, it's sewn in. There's a thin piece of mesh that's stretchy that attaches the tongue to the rest of the shoe, kind of your classic booty construction. They did a nice job with it. It's super thin, very invisible, like just enough so the tongue doesn't move around. The midsole is it's a compressed EVA, so it's your pretty standard foam. It is lighter than their previous one, so they got more stack and lighter weight. Compressed EVA, basically, it actually starts out as like a giant chunk, so it's like a double-sized version of what this midsole foam would look like. They add heat and then they squeeze it down into the mold, and then it holds it this shape. That's how they do compressed EVA. Injection molded EVA is the opposite. It starts out as this tiny little thing. They squeeze it in a really hot temperature into the mold, and then they pop the mold off, and then the shoe slowly expands. Probably a strange bucket list goal, but I would love to see that process in person. Outsole, it's very similar to all of the previous Challengers. They're 4 millimeter lugs. It's Hoka's in-house rubber blend. There's really not too much to note on that. If you've tried any of the previous, Hoka Challengers, this outsole is going to be nearly identical. Those are the shoe stats. Finn, what kind of running did you get in with this Challenger 7?
I put in 96 miles on this shoe, mostly snowpack trails, some road. I think this totally lives up to its billing as a dependable road to trail shoe. I like to think of it as sort of the Subaru Forester of trail shoes, incredibly dependable, somewhat sleek, gets the job done. I took this on a lot of runs on the streets of Salt Lake City, especially in somewhat snowy or post snowstorm run conditions where I wanted just a little bit extra traction in the road experience, but not too much to feel like it was getting in the way. Again, most of this shoe for me was tested in the Salt Lake winter. Took it on a few true mountain runs, a few Grandeur Peak summits, which is one of the primary mountains here in Salt Lake, as well as some traditional Bonneville shoreline trail miles. So, I mean, we've been doing this for a bit now. This was actually the first shoe that I tested where I put it in more than 3 or 4 unique environments. So, really gave it a pretty well-rounded test. How about you?
I got in 103 miles, cracked that 100-mile barrier, all in Ashland, Oregon. But over the course of, the last few weeks of testing, I've gotten to take it through. The trails dried out, got really hard packed, got pretty cold. Also rained a ton, so I actually got to take this through some mud. Up high, I got to get in some snow, run on some ice. I even did a full-fledged road workout in them, as well as some easy road runs, just to test its door-to-trail abilities, see how it performed at, like my threshold or marathon type pace, see how that felt. So yeah, definitely took it through the full range of what Hoka wanted someone to buy this shoe for.
Yeah.
How was,
Could I ask a question there?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, this is the first Hoka Challenger I've worn since the ATR2, which I think came out 6 or 7 years ago. So this sort of felt like a coming home. I had transitioned over to the Hoka Torrent in the interim years, and it feels to me like this is a Hoka Clifton with a little bit more traction on the bottom. Am I in the ballpark describing that there? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's exactly what Hoka has always wanted the Challenger to be, is just a Clifton with a trail outsole. And I would even go as to say, I wish Hoka leaned more into that and like literally just put a trail outsole on the Clifton. But there's a few differences, which we'll get into a little bit later on with, comparisons to this, because we both do have the Clifton 9 as well. So cool that we get to compare, can actually compare the two shoes side by side. In terms of like your sizing and width, how did this one fit for you?
Interesting wear on my foot. Almost felt like a perfect shoe. I will say with the caveat, I never took it on longer than a 2-hour session. I did feel a little bit of tightness and pull on the outer heel, as well as tightness along the top of the foot. I personally chalk that up to a slightly fatter heel cup and tongue than I normally prefer. Like, if you think about the range of heel cups and tongues, we've had stuff. I mean, I've had stuff like the Ultra Duo in the past, which was barely even a tongue, and just a firmer, more narrow heel cup in the Adidas Agravic 2, for example. And this was just a little bit more material than I like, and I think it caused a little bit of chafing in that regard. But I was surprised just based on the nature of the design up front. I thought it was going to be a narrower shoe in the forefoot than it was. And actually, it was quite spacious there. So that's why the fit for me always begins with the forefoot. And then I work backward from that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would say. Those were the things that stuck out for me. It was almost a perfect fit. Just, I'm not a big fan of like all the material that you see in the heel cup and the tongue here.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Hoka might have gotten a little bit too generous with the padding around the heel and the ankle, and then on the tongue, which had me a little confused about the sizing, because if I went to go lace my shoe up and I kicked my heels back like against the floor and really jammed my heel back into the foam, my size 10 felt perfect. But I had to like really jam my heels back and tie it somewhat snug. And I was worried that my feet would go numb during the run, but they never did. So I guess that was fine. But if I just put the shoe on and tied them up, then it felt like the shoe was a little bit small. And I think that's because there was so much room for my foot to squish back. It was kind of interesting where the first few runs, I was like, dang, this shoe runs a little small, like maybe a quarter size. But then once I started like really cranking the laces down and absorbing some of that cushion from the tongue and the ankle collar, then it actually did feel like it ran pretty true to size. Which, yeah, I mean, and I think that's something that kind of comes from more of the road shoe type background, is just that extra cushion comfort across the top at the slight expense of security and lockdown.
Yep.
For width and everything, yeah, I agree with what you said too. The 4-foot and like the toe box actually felt fine in terms of width, but it felt, yeah, it did feel kind of snug through the midfoot and into the heel, perhaps a little bit snugger than Challengers of the past. So, that'll be kind of something to be aware of. They do make this shoe in a wide, so the entire shoe does get a little bit wider, a little bit more volume across the material that they use in the upper. So, yeah, again, kind of going to that road shoe type background, like it's a little bit snugger midfoot and heel. And I feel like, yeah, like the 4-foot, the toe box, it's like wide enough for most things, like in terms of like, because you took them on quite a range of runs. Like how did the actual feel underfoot do for you when you're out on the roads and the trails?
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure we'll talk in a second about where we think this shoe is applicable in training and racing settings. I felt like there was enough cushion in this shoe to wear it, run in it in perpetuity. Like I could go on a 2-hour run, I could go on a 10-hour run, and it was going to deliver. I do think that it's specific to certain settings. Like if we're talking California carpet, in perpetuity. Where I ran into issues with the shoe in terms of set and setting was like on Grandeur Peak, for example, where the terrain is a bit more technical and or you're on more like icy snowpack terrain. This shoe did start to fail me there in terms of the grip. So
yeah, and I think part of that's due to, Hoka's in-house rubber just doesn't do that well in like true winter conditions. Like it's just not that the compound doesn't have that kind of tack or grippiness like Vibram's Mega Grip outsole has. And if they threw Mega Grip on here, I think that would improve the shoe, but it would also probably cost $20 or $30 more. So, you got to pick and choose somewhere. And then we're getting close to, Tecton X Speed Goat type pricing. So like, I kind of understand.
Yeah.
I think Hoka made the right decision by keeping their in-house rubber on the shoe to keep the cost down a little bit at the expense of, some grip on like true winter conditions.
This did feel like the Swiss Army knife of Hoka shoes for me, though, where I could take this shoe into almost any setting and be like at least 75% of the way there in terms of performance and reliability. It doesn't feel like this shoe, if you take it into any particular setting, you're going to be sacrificing too much.
No, is it? It's your vacation shoe.
Yes.
You're going on a trip, throw your one pair in. It's the Hoka Challenger. I mean, you can go on a day trip, just walk around exploring this shoe as well. You can take it on a road run. You can take it on a trail run. Like it'll do it. One thing that I was a little bit bummed about, and it's like a medium, it's like a mild temperature take. I don't know if it's a hot take. It's like, I was actually a little bit bummed with the midsole on this shoe. Like my first few runs, I thought it was a little stiff and a little bit firm. And after about 40 miles, like a little bit of flex started to, break in. So like the stiffness broke in a little bit, but I just kind of always thought the midsole felt a bit boring because it is firmer than the Clifton and it feels a little bit firmer than the past Challenger model as well.
Right.
And I just wished it was a little bit softer. Like it wasn't that inspiring to run in. So like I would put it on and I'd go run and it's fine. I could totally train in it every single day, but it left me wishing that it had a little bit more spring, a little bit more pop to it. And I know for this type of foam, that would come at the sacrifice of durability. But I think I would be willing to take a slight hit in durability for a little bit softer, a little bit bouncier foam compound, like what the Clifton 9 has. Like I understand that they made this a little firmer so that we could handle some more trail abuse, but I feel like that Clifton 9 midsole could handle just as much trail, and it's a lot
Mm,
more fun.
mm. One more point on this. What are your thoughts on the shark-tailed heel cup that Hoka has sort of doubled down on more in recent years with all these sorts of shoe models?
I have zero issues with it. Like,
Okay.
the amount of, I think it could probably go with a little bit less foam, but I like the shape. Like, I like the swoopy Achilles. Like, some people are like, oh, it kicks all this extra junk into your shoe, but it's like, if you're kicking that much junk into your shoe, like, you're going to kick junk into your shoe no matter what, unless you're wearing a gaiter. So, like, I don't know if I buy that. Like, I feel like that's all mental there at that point. But I like how it's easier to slip on. And when you're descending, steep stuff is where I see the benefits of the swoopy heel the
Yep.
most, because when you're coming down something steep and the Achilles of the shoe hits inward, it'll knock my Achilles, and that really bugs it. So having that outward swoop, I'm a fan of.
Okay. Where would you wear this shoe?
So I would wear it on most of like my mellow road or trail kind of hybrid days. Like I do a lot of that in Ashland, where like I might
Feels like
run
an
down.
Ashland shoe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This was designed for Ashland. And like last year at Western States, Tim Tollefson and Camille Herron wore the Challenger 6.
Wow.
Because there's a lot, like any spot where there's a lot of running and then maybe a bit of trail, like this is going to be great. Where I feel like this Hoka actually has created a slight overlap is with their Tecton X, because that outsole and their midsole of that shoe allows for great door to trail as well. It costs $55 more though. So then it really comes down to like an ounce lighter shoe, a Vibram outsole, and a carbon plate. Is that worth $55 more to you? For how much I enjoyed the Tecton and what I got from it, I actually did enjoy that shoe, like $55 more. But that's from like a higher performance, almost racing standpoint. From a day-to-day training standpoint, I think this checks all the boxes. Plenty good enough.
One more thing I wanted to say from earlier is I've always been shocked by Hoka's sort of avant-garde attitude around colorways. Like we're talking about navy on teal on orange on like a burnt red here. I don't know who designs for them, but I would not necessarily put these colors together.
Yeah, Hoka's definitely been, every time they release a new shoe, they always do one or two very bright models. Like the amount of times I've gotten like chili pepper colored speed goats, there's like most of them, like Speed Goat 2, 3, 4, and 5. They've all had a bright red one. So appreciate Hoka staying true to their game on that. But yeah, they want eyes to gravitate towards the shoe. And that's definitely going to happen with this one. Finn, would you race in it?
I would. I think if we were talking about a race like the Miwok 100K or, the Western States 100 or the San Diego 100, any of these like true West Coast races where you're running on manicured trails, totally. If we're talking about the Wasatch 100, something in the Mountain West where there's a little bit more rocky terrain, I'm looking at something else in Hoka stable, like a Mafate, like a Tecton. I should take back, not necessarily a Tecton, but something like the Mafate to handle those trails. How about you?
Yeah. I don't think I would race in it. I would train in it.
Wow.
But I don't quite love it enough. I don't, it's not soft enough for me to go, 50 miles plus in it. So I'm probably going to pick like a Speed Goat. Or even a Mafate, because Mafate is barely heavier, and I like the ride of the Mafate better. But then like 50 miles down, the shoe doesn't feel fast enough, and I can't quite get a secure lockdown with how much padding there is in the tongue. So my foot moves around a little bit if I'm going really fast on, single track descent. So like from a racing standpoint, it doesn't quite fall into either category for me. So like I'm wearing like the Torrent or the Tecton for like shorter races. Like I would wear the Speed Goat or the Mafate for longer races. And like, yeah, that now the Challenger, it kind of turns into like the forgotten middle child of shoes from a racing standpoint. But from training, it can absolutely hold up to every single one of those across
Yep.
like most of training you're going to do. So I think, for that reason, moving into the value, like I think for $145, you actually get pretty great value with the shoe because you get like 5 shoes in this shoe.
Yep. And I feel like I'm sure at some point in 2023 we'll do a review of like the shoes that stuck with us, our favorite shoes for the year. I could see myself going well past 100 miles in this shoe. Like anytime I have a chance to hop in this shoe to train with outside of what we're reviewing, I might come back to this because it is so versatile. I mean, heck, we're going down to Phoenix in 2 weeks, and I might just bring this because it's all purpose.
Yeah, exactly. It's that travel shoe. I actually am curious. Here's my viewer call out for the episode is,
Please.
so I was wondering that after doing just like a couple runs in the new Clifton, I'm wondering if like aside from a slight amount better grip, is the Clifton actually Hoka's best door to trail shoe? And should we do a full trail test in the new Hoka Clifton and do a review as if it's a trail shoe? If people are interested in that, I would totally put 100 trail miles on that Clifton and see how it holds up and see how it compares to something like this Challenger, because I'm wondering if the new Clifton is actually Hoka's best door to trail shoe.
I love that question, and my vote is yes. I hope we do.
Yeah, so let us know what you think. If you want us to just take the Hoka Clifton in the trails, because I'll go run it wherever, see how it holds up. If you do want to try these shoes based off of our feedback and your local run specialty shop doesn't have them, feel free to use our link below to get the Hoka Challenger 7 from our friends at Running Warehouse. Your purchase helps support the channel and allows us to continue to provide shoe reviews like this for you.